Crotone, the Cathedral Basilica. Welcome to the Cathedral Basilica of Crotone, named after the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary and under the protection of Saint Dionysius. The present structure is located in the square, from which you can access the historical centre, from where once there was the door of the surrounding walls from which one could enter the town. On the right side of the facade of the cathedral there is the bell tower, structured on 2 levels and covered by a vault. The perspective drawing has maintained its neo-Renaissance layout, given to it at the end of the 19th century. On the facade, particularly on the sides of the principal portal, there are also 2 stems. One on the left belongs to the Pope in charge, in order to indicate that it is a minor papal basilica, honorary title given to the Cathedral of Crotone by Pope John Paul II, 1984, for the purpose of strengthening the relationship of this sanctuary church with the Pope. The other, on the right, belongs to the Archbishop. The church can be entered from the 3 doors, correspondent to the internal nave, which divide the layout of the architectonical structure. The principal portal is composed of the monumental bronze doors, sculpted in 1986 by Ludovico Graziani, a local artist. On the left side of the doors there are sculpted some events which represent the history of the church and of the town. For example, the Turk invasion, the attempt of the theft of the Virgin Mary picture, and Saint Dionysius the Areopagite. Entering the small right door there is the first nave, lower than the middle one, that is characterized by a rhythmic sequence of spaces, with arches that frame 3 wall altars. The first altar is dedicated to the Immaculate Virgin from the Suriano family, with an oil-on-canvas painting signed and dated on the lower left, Antonio Timpanella Fecit, 1740, which represents the Virgin and the Saints Bruno of Cologne on the left and Anthony of Padova on the right. The second altar is dedicated to Saint Joseph, with a recently made statue. The third is dedicated to Saint Francis of Paula, also with a recently made statue. On the right arm of the transept there is the Epiphany Chapel, which is higher than the nave and surmounted by a dome. The support of the Berlingeri family is shown by the crests located above the altar, on the base of the 2 side columns and on the left side of the floor. On the altar, an oil-painted canvas represents the adoration of the Magi. There is also a recently placed baptismal font from the 16th century, made of pink stone, with a monolithic basin decorated with human faces in the corners, and with lions on the base of the stand. Going along, one encounters the cantoria wanted by the Bishop Giuseppe Capocchiano, 1774 to 1788, whose crest is located at the centre of the stage, on which is placed the pipe organ. At the end of the right nave there is the Chapel of the Blessed Virgin of Capocolonna. The present appearance of the chapel, inaugurated in 1911, is the result of the renovation planned by the Neapolitan architect Pietro Paolo Farinelli. The decorative system is composed by a balanced fusion of marbles, frescoes, stucco works and gold. Frescoes are all painted by the painter and decorator Vincenzo Severino. After the brazen balustrade in Liberty style, which has on the gate's pillar the crest of the Berlingeri, a notable family from Crotone, which is a sign of their involvement in the renovation works, one can admire the chapel in all its splendour. In the chapel's vault, for example, the coronation of the Virgin is portrayed, while on the top, held by pendentives with the following biblical figures, Joel, Ruth, Judith and Deborah, the dove of the Holy Spirit dominates. In the lunette of the internal facade, the figure of Saint Dionysius, holding with his right hand the town and with his left hand the crozier, dominates. On the walls of the first bay above the wooden choir stalls, On the right there is the canvas picture from De Falco, dated 1904, depicting the failed siege of Crotone from the Turks in 1638, who escaped after seeing the bright appearance of the sacred image brought in procession along the walls of the town. While on the opposite wall there is the canvas picture of Boschetto, also dated 1904, which reminds us of the miraculous event of 1519, when the Turks tried in vain to burn the sacred image when it was still guarded in the little church of Capocolonna, located on the hill of Hera Lacinia, a few kilometers from Crotone. In the deepest area of the chapel, on the right and left walls, angels playing instruments are shown, also painted by Severino. The altar, of which an epigraph on the back facade reminds us its consecration was carried out by the Bishop Emanuele Merra, 1901, has on its two sides the crest of Berlinghieri, melted in bronze. The ears of wheat and grape clusters that decorate the antependium, which has a central cross, are also in bronze. On top of the altar there are 12 niches for the silver images of the apostles, replaced after the theft of 1983. Behind the altar, framed in the semicircular arch in the center of the wall, the image of the Madonna of Capocolonna is placed. It is a tempera on panel from the second half of the 15th century, made by an unknown painter from the Neapolitan school. Later, the image was shifted on canvas in order to prevent it from the ruin due to its wooden support. The picture is inserted between two black marble columns with a smooth shaft crowned by white marble capitals with a prelatic crest, which hold an entablature in whose frieze "Privileged Altar" is written. For the will of Pope Gregory XIII, every Mass celebrated in this chapel since 1579 has the power of granting a full indulgence. Within a frame in rectangular stucco, Severino has painted the portrait of God the Father. On the background, in the arch, is written Ave Maria Gratia Plena. On the side of the chapel of the Madonna of Capocolonna, 3 steps higher than the rest of the church, before the presbytery, there is a semicircular arch on which the crest of Monsignor Lembo, Bishop of Crotone, from 1860 to 1883 dominates. Some recent changes wanted by Monsignor Agostino, 1974 to 1999, in order to make it adhere to the liturgical rules decided by the Second Vatican Council, destroyed 2 altars from the 17th century and inserted a ceramic crucified Christ from the Roman sculptor Giovanni Ranocchi. Nowadays it is possible to admire also the beautiful wooden choir made in the 17th century from Bishop Caraffa, 1664 to 1683, whose crests are repeated on all sides. On the walls are hung on the right the canvas of Nicola la Piccola, 1727 to 1790, which depicts Jesus on his return from visiting the doctors, commissioned from the grain merchant Benedetto Migliotti in 1767, as read on the bottom. And on the left, the martyrdom of Saint Dionysius, attributed to the painter Corrado Giaquinto, 1703 to 1765, and dated probably towards 1759. On the pier of the first left bay, the marbled pulpit of 1893 is placed, commissioned by Giuseppe Cavalieri, 1883 to 1899, to the Archbishop Farinelli, author also of the renovation of the chapel of the Madonna of Capocolonna. Going down towards the entrance, following one another, 4 semicircular arches are seen, sustained by piers that portray the rhythm of this nave, as wanted by Pietro Raimondi, 1946 to 1971, immediately after the Second World War. The piers are structured by pilasters covered by marble polychromes, with the exception of the capitals in Ionic order in stucco and gold. The pavement was also realized with marble. Going along the central nave, on the left side towards the end, there is the third nave. The first door encountered is the sacristy. In the entrance hall, one can admire the valuable wooden armoire, on top of which there are reproductions of the crests of the bishops of Crotone. There are also some shrines containing the relics of saints. Further along, one can find the Chapel of the Crucifix, dominated by a wooden sculpture, highly adored since the 17th century because it was believed to be miraculous. Behind the crucifix, there is a painting on panel portraying Christ on the cross, at the feet of which Our Lady of Sorrows and St. John the Evangelist appear. The panel is dated 1757, and the name of the purchaser, Benedetto Migliotti, is also written on it. Underneath there is an altar dated from the end of the 19th century. On the right wall of the chapel since 2005 there have been the remains of Monsignor Lembo. On the left wall one encounters a niche in which a painting portraying Our Lady of Sorrows is displayed, coming from Saints Peter and Paul Church, probably attributable to Domenico Basile, painter from the 18th century. Going along, one can encounter the Chapel of St. Dionysus, in which centre in a niche covered in silver above the altar there is the wooden painted statue of St. Dionysus, depicted in the usual iconographic image in which he is holding his severed head in his hand. According to the critics, the sculpture is dated from the end of the 17th century and the beginning of the 18th century, and has been recently attributed to the Salernitan sculptor Nicola Fumo, 1647 to 1725, from Gianfrancesco Solferino. Underneath there is an altar with an antependium from the first half of the 19th century. There is a marble tondo with the portrait of the Madonna of Capocolonna. On the side walls, after the Second World War, two paintings from Attilio Cortese portraying the conversion of Saint Dionysius the Areopagite and his arrival to Crotone have been placed. At the end of the nave, on the other side corresponding to the Chapel of the Virgin of Capocolonna, there is the Chapel of the Holy Sacrament, consecrated in 1715 by Monsignor Guardia, Bishop of Crotone from 1715 to 1718.